Two nations dominate the global spotlight right now, the United States and Israel. One, the greatest military and economic power the world has ever known. The other, a country the size of a small province, but which holds the prophetic attention of the entire earth. While world leaders negotiate agreements, mobilize armies, and redefine alliances in the Middle East, one question remains unanswered in prophetic circles. Why doesn't the book of Revelation explicitly mention the United States? And why is Israel, a nation that didn't even exist 80 years ago, at the absolute center of end times prophecies? Daniel saw empires rise and fall. John received the revelation of how the world would end, and both point to Jerusalem as the final stage of human history. But what happens when the greatest Western power and the central prophetic nation collide with forces that the Bible had already identified millennia ago? The United States controls the largest economy on the planet. It possesses the global reserve currency. They control the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, possess military bases in over 70 countries, and dominate mass surveillance technology. No empire in history has accumulated so much power so quickly and so extensively. Yet when we open the book of Daniel, we find no mention of this Western power. When we read Revelation, we see beasts, horns, dragons, empires of the East and West, but there is no clear reference to the American continent. This silence is unsettling. Scholars have debated for decades. Will the United States collapse before the Great Tribulation? Will it lose relevance amidst a devastating conflict? Or will it voluntarily integrate into a global system of centralized government, as described in Revelation chapter 13? The absence of direct mention does not signify historical irrelevance, but it may mean that in the last days, this nation will no longer occupy the leading role it has today. And that changes everything. The history of the United States officially begins in 1776, but its spiritual roots go back to the Puritan pilgrims who arrived in North America in the 17th century. They saw the new land as a new Canaan, a place where they could worship God without persecution. Many of the nation's founding fathers had visions rooted in biblical principles, and the Constitution was structured on Christian values of individual liberty, human dignity, and separation of powers. For 250 years, the United States has prospered under a worldview that recognized the sovereignty of God. They expanded from coast to coast, became an industrial powerhouse, survived world wars, and after 1945 emerged as the only superpower capable of shaping the global order. But this meteoric rise coincides precisely with another prophetic event of colossal magnitude, the rebirth of Israel in 1948. Two nations, two destinies, connected in ways that few fully comprehend. Israel was destroyed as a nation in 70 AD when the Roman general Titus besieged Jerusalem, burned the temple, and dispersed the Jewish people throughout the empire. For almost 2,000 years, the Jews lived without land, without government, without an army, scattered across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. They suffered unimaginable persecutions, crusades, inquisitions, pogroms in Russia, and the Holocaust that claimed 6 million lives in World War II. Under any rational historical analysis, this people should have disappeared, assimilated by other cultures, extinct with the passage of time. But God had other plans. In Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 24 to 28, the Lord promises, "I will take you from among the nations and gather you from all the countries and bring you into your own land." On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. After 2 millennia, the nation was reborn, and the United States was the first country to recognize it, just 11 minutes after the Declaration of Independence. The alliance between the United States and Israel is no accident. Since 1948, Washington has been Jerusalem's main military, economic, and diplomatic protector. Billions of dollars in military aid flow annually. Missile defense technology, such as the Iron Dome, was funded and developed in direct partnership. In the United Nations Security Council, the United States systematically vetoes any resolution that disproportionately condemns Israel, but this relationship goes beyond geopolitical interests. There is a deep current within American Christianity that sees Israel as the literal fulfillment of biblical promises. Millions of American evangelicals believe that the restoration of Israel is a direct sign that we are in the last days. And here is the crucial point. If Israel is God's prophetic clock and the United States is the guardian of that clock, what happens when the guardian weakens or changes position? The world is about to find out. Daniel chapter 2 describes King Nebuchadnezzar's vision of a gigantic statue. The head was of gold, representing Babylon. The chest and arms of silver symbolized the Medo-Persian Empire. The belly and thighs of bronze pointed to Greece under Alexander the Great. The legs of iron corresponded to Rome, but the feet were a mixture of iron and clay, indicating a final empire divided, fragile in essence, but with remnants of Roman power. Scholars identify this last empire with a future European Union, or a confederation of Western nations inheriting the Roman legacy. Daniel chapter 7 expands the vision, showing 4 beasts: a lion, a bear, a leopard, and a terrifying 4th beast with 10 horns. These horns represent kings or kingdoms that will arise in the last days. The problem is clear. None of these descriptions mentions a Western Hemisphere power like America. This raises the inevitable question: where will the United States be when this prophetic configuration is fulfilled? Rome officially fell in 476 AD, but its legal, administrative, linguistic, and cultural structures endured. Latin gave rise to Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian, and Romanian. Roman law underpins Western legal systems to this day. The Roman Catholic Church has become the most enduring institution in Western history, with political, economic, and spiritual influence spanning centuries. When the Holy Roman Empire was established by Charlemagne in the 19th century AD, it was a deliberate attempt to resurrect Roman greatness under a Christian guise. Later, Napoleon Bonaparte and Adolf Hitler dreamed of unified empires that would dominate Europe and the world. Today, the European Union represents the latest attempt at continental unification. With 27 member countries, a single currency, open borders, a supranational parliament, and centralized legislation, the European Union is the modern embodiment of Daniel's vision. Iron mixed with clay, strong in structure but fragile in cultural and political cohesion. Zechariah chapter 12 verse 3 declares, "In that day I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will gather against it." We are witnessing this firsthand. Jerusalem is the only city in the world whose capital is internationally disputed. Israel has declared Jerusalem its eternal capital, but most nations refuse to recognize it, maintaining embassies in Tel Aviv. In 2017, President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moved the American embassy, provoking global diplomatic shockwaves. The city is sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. It is where Solomon's temple was built, destroyed, and rebuilt. It is where Jesus was crucified and resurrected. It is where Muslims believe Muhammad ascended to heaven. And it is where, according to Revelation, the Antichrist will establish his final throne, desecrating the Holy of Holies and declaring himself God. Since 1967, when Israel recaptured East Jerusalem in the Six-Day War, Jewish religious groups have been working discreetly to prepare for the reconstruction of the Third Temple. The Temple Institute, located in the Jewish quarter of the Old City, has already manufactured more than 60 ritual objects according to exact biblical specifications. golden menorahs, incense altars, priestly garments, Levitical musical instruments. Red heifers, required for ceremonial purification according to Numbers chapter 19, have been genetically bred and are being monitored. Architectural plans for the temple were drawn with millimeter precision. Priests from the lineage of Aaron have been identified through DNA testing and are being trained to resume sacrificial rituals. There is only one problem. The Temple Mount is currently occupied by the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. Any attempt to remove these structures would provoke an instant global religious war. But according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, the Antichrist will sit in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. For this to happen, the temple needs to exist. Before continuing, I feel that God has a special calling for you. I want to ask you to become an instrument to spread this message. Pause the video now, subscribe to the channel, and take the opportunity to leave your like. Every click you make can help others receive this same video on their devices right now, bringing this message to those who need it most. Don't wait. Do your part now. God may be counting on you to fulfill this purpose. In September 2020, under the mediation of the United States, Israel signed the Abraham Accords with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, followed by Morocco and Sudan. It was the greatest diplomatic normalization between Israel and Arab nations since the treaty with Egypt in 1979. Air routes were opened, bilateral trade exploded, and joint investments in technology and infrastructure were announced. The promise was of regional peace and prosperity. But Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 speaks of a leader who will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, that is, 7 years. This leader will break the alliance halfway through the period, triggering the Great Tribulation. Many scholars see the Abraham Accords as a foreshadowing of this final treaty. Saudi Arabia, the most influential Islamic power, is in secret negotiations with Israel. If Riyadh normalizes relations with Jerusalem, the Middle East will be completely reconfigured. But this peace will be temporary. Ezekiel chapter 38 describes a massive invasion of Israel led by Gog from the land of Magog, identified by many as modern-day Russia, accompanied by Persia, Iran, Kush, Ethiopia, and Put, Libya. This coalition will attack when Israel is secure and confident. Vladimir Putin has consolidated Russia as a global military power once again. Since 2015, Russian forces have been operating in Syria alongside the regime of Bashar al-Assad, establishing permanent military bases in the Mediterranean. This places Russian troops less than 300 kilometers from Israel's northern border. Simultaneously, Iran expanded its influence through the Shiite Crescent. It controls the Iraqi government, finances Hezbollah in Lebanon, with over 150,000 missiles aimed at Israel, supports the Houthis in Yemen who attack ships in the Red Sea, and maintains militias in Syria. In January 2020, Iranian General Qasem Soleimani was killed by an American airstrike, nearly triggering full-scale war. The Iranian nuclear program continues to advance despite international sanctions. Israel has already conducted cyber attacks and covert operations against Iranian nuclear facilities, including the elimination of nuclear scientists. Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly stated that Israel will never allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons. Ezekiel prophesied this Russia-Iran alliance 2,600 years ago, and now we are seeing its formation before our very eyes. Revelation chapter 16 verse 12 mentions the kings of the east who will cross the dry Euphrates River during the sixth bowl of God's wrath. Traditionally, scholars see this as a reference to China and possibly India, Japan, and other Asian powers. China, under Xi Jinping, has become the world's second-largest economy, with open ambitions to surpass the United States. The Belt and Road Initiative connects Asia to Europe and Africa through infrastructure funded by Beijing, extending Chinese influence globally. China has strengthened ties with Iran, buying oil in yuan instead of dollars, weakening American dominance. Beijing has also sold facial recognition surveillance technology to dozens of countries, building a global network of digital control. In the South China Sea, military tensions are growing. Taiwan lives under constant threat of invasion. If China were to annex Taiwan, the global economic shock would be devastating, as the island produces more than 60% of the world's advanced semiconductors. All of this points to a reconfiguration of power that displaces the West and elevates the East as the dominant force in recent times. Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, describes a system where no one will be able to buy or sell without the mark of the beast on their right hand or forehead. For centuries, this seemed like fiction. Today, it is no longer. Biometric digital identification technology already exists. Fingerprints, facial recognition, iris scans, vein patterns, subcutaneous RFID chip implants. Companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink are developing brain-computer interfaces. Central bank digital currencies are being implemented in China and Europe and tested in the United States. These currencies allow for full tracking of each transaction, control of spending by category, and even expiration of money if not used within a specified time. During the COVID-19 pandemic, digital vaccination passports were introduced, conditioning access to work, travel, and public services. What was once conspiracy theory has become public policy. 2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 through 5 describes the last days, for people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without natural affection, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, without love for the good, treacherous, headstrong, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. This description perfectly matches contemporary Western culture. In the United States and Europe, institutions that once promoted Christian values now actively combat them. Historic churches embrace doctrines contrary to Scripture. Marriage rates plummet while divorces, abortions, and sexual identity confusion explode. The word truth has been redefined as subjective and personal. Laws criminalize the preaching of certain biblical passages as hate speech. Children are indoctrinated in public schools to reject their parents' faith. This moral collapse is not accidental. It is the spiritual preparation of the world to accept the final deception. Revelation chapter 13 introduces two beasts, one that rises from the sea, representing political power, and another that rises from the earth, the false prophet who exercises religious authority. The false prophet will perform great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of men. He will convince the world to worship the first beast and will receive power to give life to the image of the beast. Global ecumenical movements have been working for decades to unite all religions under a common framework. Interreligious dialogues between the Vatican, Islamic leaders, Buddhists, Hindus, and Jews are proliferating. The narrative is always the same. We all worship the same God, just with different names. In 2019, Pope Francis signed the document on human fraternity with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, declaring that the diversity of religions is God's will. This directly contrasts with John chapter 14 verse 6, where Jesus states, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." The false prophet will unify religions under persuasive lies, preparing for global worship of the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 19 verses 11 to 21 describes the return of Christ. "I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. The armies of the earth, led by the beast and the false prophet, will gather in the valley of Megiddo, known as Armageddon, to wage war against the Lamb. But there will be no battle. Jesus will speak, and his enemies will be instantly destroyed. The beast and the false prophet will be thrown alive into the lake of fire. Satan will be imprisoned for 1,000 years. Israel will finally recognize Jesus as the Messiah, as Zechariah chapter 12 verse 10 says, "They will look on me, the one they have pierced." Christ will establish his millennial kingdom in Jerusalem, fulfilling all the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The United States, Europe, China, all nations will be subject to Christ's rule. Israel's prophetic role will culminate when the King of the Jews reigns from Jerusalem. And everything we see today, all the political, economic, and spiritual chaos, is merely the stage being set for this glorious and inevitable outcome. The United States and Israel occupy unique roles in history and prophecy. One, as the dominant power of the present, whose prophetic absence raises urgent questions about its future. The other, as the absolute center of God's plan, whose very existence is a miracle and the fulfillment of ancient promises. Daniel saw empires rise and fall. John received the revelation of how it will all end. Both point to Jerusalem. As global alliances form, control technologies advance, morality collapses, and wars draw near, the prophetic clock ticks faster. We do not know the day or the hour, but Jesus instructed us to observe the signs of the times, and the signs are everywhere. The question is no longer if these things will happen, but when. Are you prepared? Is your life founded on Christ, the only safe refuge when the world collapses? Because empires pass, nations fall, but the Word of God remains forever. Now I invite you to subscribe to strengthen our work, for we know that Jerusalem will be the final stage. Christ will return in glory, and each of us will need to give an account of how we responded to the truth that has been revealed to us. Share this knowledge with those you love before it's too late.